And to the ongoing war in Ukraine, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has rejected out of hand a Russian order for a truce over the Orthodox Christmas period, saying the proposed ceasefire is a trick to halt the Ukraine army's progress in the eastern Donbas region and allow Moscow to bring in more troops. Russian President Vladimir Putin had ordered a 36-hour ceasefire after a call for a Christmas truce by the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill of Moscow. The Kremlin said on Thursday the order did not specify whether the ceasefire would apply to both offensive and defensive operations by Russia, and it was not clear whether Russia would hit back if Ukraine kept fighting. Speaking pointedly in Russian and addressing the Kremlin and Russians as a whole on Thursday night, Zelenskyy said Moscow had repeatedly ignored Kyiv's peace plan. The war would end, he said, when Russian troops leave Ukraine or are thrown out. Russia's Orthodox Church observes Christmas on January the 7th. Ukraine's main Orthodox Church has been recognized as independent and rejects any notion of allegiance to the Moscow Patriarch. Meanwhile, Russian state media says a ceasefire ordered by President Putin on Thursday has come into effect in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine attacked each other's positions in eastern Ukraine early on Friday. Russian shells hit Kramatorsk, a Ukrainian city near the front line in the industrial Donetsk region that Russia claims as its territory, the city mayor said. I am joined on the word now to discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine by the chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora, Russia, Dr. Godwin Ibe. Good to have you join us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in.
So just to clear, because there's a bit of confusion here, because we know that Ukraine has rejected the Russian truce for the Orthodox Christmas, but we understand that there's also now a report in Russia that the ceasefire ordered by President Putin on Thursday has now come into effect in Ukraine. Talk to us about that.
Yes, it's true that the ceasefire has been announced. 36-hour ceasefire, and of course, it was asked, or do I say, pushed by Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and also Erdogan of Turkey, President Erdogan of Turkey. There's been plausible arguments on both sides on the motives behind the ceasefire. Russia saying it's the Orthodox Christmas on the 7th of January, while the Ukraine saying it's a cover for logistics and all of that. But it has come into effect. And as of today, as we speak, there's already reports from the Ministry of Defense of Russia that there's been, some offensive against the Russian positions in the Donbas region. And they've publicly announced that Ukraine isn't following not only by words, but by action, and not following this ceasefire. It's unfortunate because this ceasefire is a great opportunity to save lives, irrespective of the reason. 36 hours is a great opportunity to save Ukrainian and Russian lives in this conflict, which I consider a Russian-NATO conflict staged in Ukraine.
But the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has said from the very beginning that he's not going to, he has rejected the truce from the very beginning. He says that, look, the Orthodox Church in Ukraine doesn't have any allegiance to the Orthodox Church in Moscow. Doesn't this further buttress the fact that when people say there is disinformation as regarding the war in Russia?
No one is tying your hands with a ceasefire. Whatever you accuse the other side of doing, you can still do it yourself. Nothing is stopping you from doing it. But one thing is clear. 36 hours of seizure of artillery fire is a great opportunity to save both Ukrainian and Russian lives in 36 hours. And who knows what will happen if it continues. If it's successful, maybe there will be talks about it extending. And also, if it is violated, if there's no agreement on this ceasefire, it can be a reason for escalation after this 36-hour period, because there will be enough, obviously, reasons for both sides to argue for escalation.
And many times before the war even began, President Putin has said he doesn't have any plan to invade Ukraine, and he did. So when Ukraine says, look, and international community as well says, look, there is no reason to trust President Putin with this truce, you do not think that they have their claims should be taken with, their claims are valid?
Come on, we are speaking like politicians speak the truth all the time. Didn't, for example, the US say they were a weapon of mass destruction in Iraq and invaded Iraq and there was no weapon of mass destruction? Had there not been Ghost of Kiev propaganda, which didn't turn out to be true? What about the Nord Stream explosion, which was initially was said that Russia did and now we are hearing sabotage? Come on, this is politics. But the fact of the ground is that 36 hours is a great opportunity to save lives. It doesn't tie anybody's hands, but at least for this period, if it's respected, it shows, it builds trust, especially on the coming from the fact that leaders such as Merkel, ex-chancellor of Germany, and Hollande came out to say that the Minsk agreement was just a front for Ukraine to build up defensive to attack, Russian positions in Donbas. This lack of trust, this trust is missing in the relationship. So if this 36 hours, in addition to the various prisoner exchanges that have been going on during this conflict, if this trust can be built, then it builds enough grounds, sufficient grounds for negotiation and bringing an end to the conflict through peace and dialogue, because both Russia and NATO add significant value to the world. And of course, it will be good for everybody, including Africans, Asians, Europeans, Russians, if both Russia and United States or NATO countries can come together instead of using Ukraine as a stage.
All right, I wish we could talk about the popularity of this war in Russia, but my time is up. Thank you so much for talking to us, Dr. Godwin.
You're welcome.